What's up, y'all? This is Dreams, episode 6, and we have our first female joining us today, the one and only Miss Carolyn Griffey. She's about to hop on with us. If you're not familiar with Carolyn, she is the daughter of Mr. Dick Griffey, the man behind Solar Records, Sounds of Los Angeles Records. Long catalog of groups there. Midnight Star. She's in Shalimar right now. She's singing as the female lead in Shalimar. So if you're familiar with their tunes, some jams there. So yeah, let's pop her in. Let her tell you her story of how she started in music. I mean, obviously she's carrying on a legacy in the family, but I'm gonna let her tell you pretty much her seminal influential moments in music that kept her pursuing music outside of just being, a family member in it. So here she is. Let's pop her in.
JKT.
Miss Griffey, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm running around. I'm sorry. I thought I'd have a nicer setting in the background, but
That's
Saturday,
okay.
the life of a non-traveling entertainment person changes into something else. It's now mom stuff, business stuff, weekend stuff. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, this has been an interesting take on exactly what we're supposed to do as performers. I know you were on the road just before this. I was doing local shows in my town I grew up in, and basically, um, yeah, we're all at a standstill there. But to get back to today, I wanted to welcome you to Dreams. This is the interview where we kind of dig into how, why, and what are some of the influential moments that kept you pursuing music and that brought you where you are today. So maybe just, I guess, start, since we're going to put this on YouTube later, start introduce who you are, what you've done. Yeah, there's obviously a legacy with your family, but I want
Right.
to hear your story too.
Right. Well, that's cool. I see. It's funny. I see some of my people. Hey, Sharon's from overseas, from Newcastle, England.
Right.
Um, Obviously, well, I'm Carolyn Griffey, and I am from the Griffey family, which is actually the CEO and founder of Soul Train Records and Solar Records. Dick Griffey is the late Dick Griffey, my father. But I came up in music, being the child of a music mogul. And of course, my mother, Carrie Lucas, also being first lady of Soul Train Records, Solar Records, and having a career in music. But I don't think it was just that. I think it was the fact that, and Joel, because we know with our history how far we go back, being a part of, raising children, what comes around, what comes about when you're raised in it.
Yeah.
Of course, us being born in the industry, of course, we all want to be in it. But I think it was more some of the friendships and some of the I think the way we fuse as a musical family that influenced me a lot more than just being in it or just
Mm.
being born with a mother who sang to her all the time and a grandmother. And I come from a musical family, so that's always been in my blood. But it also came with a big price. It's like I had to come up against some heavy hitters coming up. So believe it or not, as much of a comical ham as I was as a kid, I was really shy. And if you can believe that, I was really shy and I never really wanted to sing. I mean, imagine singing in front of Shalimar, singing in front of the Whispers, singing in front of with a mother who has an angelic, crisp resin in her voice that nobody could touch. Here I come with this little scratchy, raspy voice, and at that time, there were no Layla Hathaways, there were no deep, sultry females that came in and letting you know that it was okay, or Julie McKnight's, if
Right.
you will. So the thing is, for me, it wasn't just a thing of that. It was a building process because even though in my heart I wanted to be an artist, I was actually afraid to be an artist, which kind of it segues into an interesting story of mishaps. Like I met Jody Watley's sister of all people. Michelle Watley introduced me to a girl named Tiara when we were young girls when I was coming up in high school. I think I just graduated high school, and And mind you, drama, music classes, theater arts, all that stuff I failed in school. Believe it or not, I would get up in front of a class and freeze. Now I clown all day long, but I get up in front of a class and I would just completely freeze. So I started my career hiding behind other people. So I met Tiara Lamax, and believe it or not, she was a white girl. What she really wasn't. You remember? I think you remember Tiara, my girlfriend, my best friend at the time. Difference was we used to laugh because I was the Wonder Bread and she was the wheat. Her parents were evangelists, brought up in the black churches, had done all this the gospel stuff, which at that time I hadn't done it. So she was really soulful, and she just had this. I mean, literally, she wanted to do a group, a black and white duo, and we were called Absolute. So we were convinced that this was going to be the new thing. We had never seen really anything like that, and we set up a come on now, what do you call it? A when you audition, not audition, but pretty
Like
much
a
audition,
showcase.
a showcase. Can you believe I forgot that? That's how old I'm getting. We did a showcase, and the showcase consisted of um, Dick Griffey, of course, my father. Everybody thought, oh, she just got a record deal because that man made me rehearse. He made us put it together. He said he wasn't going to give me nothing. We had to rent out our own rehearsal hall. So he called together he called together Babyface, LA, and all these people that I'm seeing every day. It was nerve wracking for me to get up in front of you've got the girls in Climax, everybody that I had grown up and watched now watching me, and I was just, I mean, literally went into it with my eyes closed. So we did the showcase. That one really didn't go over so well. So what happened is, and he basically told me it wasn't good enough. I had to go back to the drawing board. He was not going to sign me.
What age were you?
I was what, 17, 17, 17, going into 18, I think. So what happened was we got with some producers, a guy by the name of D. Levance. I love to this day. I'm still good friends with D. Levance. He ended up being the musical director for the Isleys for a while, and I know now he's doing a lot of stuff in Vegas and in LA. But D. Levance put together a showcase for us, an actual showcase. My father rented out this place in Beverly Hills called Pips, and I mean, and then that's when it got real because he said he started coming to the rehearsals and he was watching. He was like, okay, he saw what we were trying to do, but he was still so hard on me. He literally tried to shake me down. So we did it. We got signed, and he didn't tell me that he actually had invited some people from Sony Epic at that time because we were doing a distribution with them. So we actually ended up getting signed, and we were on Sony Epic Records, Epic Sony at the time. And then our career was just budding, even though I hated the music. Well, I'll get into that later. And then I got pregnant. I got pregnant with my first son.
Huh?
You know,
What
as
was
you
the
know,
name of the What was the name of the
the
duo?
name of the group was Absolute, and we had a
Absolute.
single
That's right.
called Cheap Shot. And the
Okay.
song, don't you even look at me. It was so embarrassing because I hated the song. I know it's so funny. I hated the song because we under our fingers at the time. I was dating Albie Shore, and at the time, Tiara was dating Chucky Booker. We were hanging around Keith Crouch. We had the biggest producers and artists right at our fingertips at that time, and couldn't use them. My father didn't want to pay them to make the bomb album. And then at that time, we were hanging out with Damian Hall from Guy, and we had all the kind of New Jack Swing folks. Christopher Williams couldn't get a song with anybody. Johnny Gill, I mean, just you name it. He picked his house producers and writers. And I'm not saying that they weren't good, but one of the writers on there, I really couldn't stand her. It was a that's a whole nother story. There's a lot of Empire stuff going on. I don't know how deep you want to get, Joe, but we'll kind of
I
leave.
don't know. No, I don't know how deep you want to
Yeah,
get.
you know me. I'm pretty 100 all the time. But I didn't like the song, and they released it. Epic was trying to put a real effort behind it, but when I got pregnant with my first son, Curtis, which is now artist Kid Third, of course you know him as Curtis. My father really was such an old school, even though he was a visionary and he was a mogul. And, I mean, he was the type of guy, and like I said, I'll get back on my musical journey, but he was the type of guy that you had to make it his idea for it to be an idea, if that makes any sense, because he was so genius. He was so used to really doing it. So it was kind of, I had to do the Jedi mind trick, and I didn't know how to do that with him then because I was just fighting for position to get his attention, being the second girl, always being the one in trouble. My sister was working with him. I was always in some kind of trouble. So, just like I mean, at that time, I had introduced him to some rappers. I was doing A&R, and that's the thing. My story gets a little jumbled because I was an artist, and that was the fight to be an artist because my father had already made me an executive at Solar
Mm-hmm.
Records. I was, I kind of did what how the Jewish community, how they do their kids. They pick them up, they do errands, they put them in the mail room. They really show them the business step by step. My father essentially did the same thing with us. So, I was running errands, I was a messenger, I did the mail, I did what kind of scrub jobs or whatever. Then I got to be a receptionist for Solar Records, do the greeting and all that other stuff, which by the way, he said I was the best receptionist he ever had. So that was one of the only compliments he had given me when I was younger. But then I went into A&R and then got into some promotions and marketing. But his thing was he was angry with me because I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to be in the music industry. And he said, okay, if I give you this job, you got to do it. But all of a sudden now you want to cross and you want to be an artist. You either have to be an artist or you have to be a singer. And at that time, I was like, why can't I do both?
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing about it is, I I mean, it was like I think back, and it's funny. I was like, I was actually trying to set trends, and he really didn't allow me to do it. And it just kind of flips back when you think about he was the one at the helm of so many careers, at the helm of so many groundbreaking experiences in the music industry that a lot of people still don't know about. We've been kind of working on this documentary for a long time, and a lot of other people have gotten his thunder because we haven't really let our voices be heard yet. But it's really going to be amazing, especially as I share things that a lot of people don't know about my father. But he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to let me be an artist. He said, you can't do both. So I said, screw it. I quit my job at Solar. I said, I want to be an artist. Wasn't getting a paycheck anymore. Like I say, but the thing is, he was trying to teach me just how hard the business really was, and he wasn't really giving me breaks. And I had something to prove because I didn't want people to think that I got a record deal because my dad was Dick Griffey. I wanted them to know I busted my ass to really win his respect. And I kind of left off talking about I got pregnant. Then I came out and I was like, Dad, this could be a movement for women. I'm pregnant. It's never really been done before. Why can't I just do that, have the baby? And he says, because if you're either going to be a mother or you're going to be an artist. And it was like, oh my gosh, like I can't win for losing with this man. It's like I found myself continuously fighting with my dad. And right after that, Whitney got pregnant with Bobby Christina and did I'm Every Woman pregnant. Not to mention, here comes, Puffy Combs had already come. This is when he was an executive for a while. Here comes this Negro rapping and becoming an artist on his own label. And I'm sitting there looking at my dad, not to mention I brought some rap acts when I was doing A&R to Solar Records. I will never forget. Matter of fact, Damon Thomas, the Underdogs, was actually one of my first A&R people that I found. And he reminded me so much of Babyface. Damon and I are still friends to this day. And we talk about that. But it's funny, later on, he ended up taking over my dad's building in Hollywood with Babyface. There's so much history, Joel. We might have to do a part two. But
okay.
But
You mean the Edmonds building?
The Edmonds building. We built that building, 1635 North Cahuenga, February 1st, 1981. We broke ground in Hollywood. My father did a development deal with Hollywood because Hollywood at the time was a declining. It was a declining. Everything in Hollywood was declining. It was old. They weren't really putting any money towards the refurbishment of it. So my father was the first person to step and the first black man to actually build a building in Hollywood. And that was the beginning of the really kind of the gentrification of Hollywood. So that's a proud moment. So every time I look at that building, I think of just what it took and the memories and the fact that we planted something in now. That's not even the Edmonds building. You know what? Diane Warren bought it.
Oh, okay.
Diane Warren now has it.
Hmm.
And so the thing is, gosh, there's so much. But I think what kept me going, my story just goes on and on. So I had to quit that for that moment. The funny thing is, I did forget to mention the fact that I am now in Shalimar, and we'll get to that. Shalimar was always my favorite group. When I tell you my favorite group, like you have like Michael Jackson was of course one of the biggest artists in my life, and the fact that my dad promoted his concerts and we had a personal relationship with the Jackson family, you know, those things aren't real. Like Michael Jackson, I think was the only person in my life in the industry that even though I grew up knowing him, still when he was around, I just would freeze. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I don't
King
care if
Pop,
you
I'd
know
freeze.
I don't care if you know everybody in the business. When you saw Mike, it was just like he's talking to you, and you're like, yeah. But it was funny because Jeffrey Daniel of Shalimar, who of course I grew up around and had a close relationship, Howard Hewitt had the biggest crush on growing up. But I got to actually be choreographed by Jeffrey Daniel in my video for Cheap Shot Absolute's single. And the funny thing is, Jackie Jackson's daughter, Brandy, I'm sure you guys know Brandy, she was the little girl in our video, and Tommy Davidson from In Living Color was also in it. So you guys can go ahead and Google it. I mean, it's embarrassing to me, but now look, my daughter's looking at me because she loves that corny, corny video. But that's kind of
Carolyn, can I ask a question? Would
absolutely.
you say that Solar is to Los Angeles as Motown is to Detroit, or Stax is to Memphis? Like,
But think about it. The acronym
yeah,
SOLAR, SOLAR, Sound of Los Angeles Records.
and the catalog. I mean, Midnight
The,
Star
the
and just.
Midnight Star. But see, the thing is, Babyface was a staff writer. Kenny was a staff writer for
Mm,
so many people, for all the acts. And gosh, when I think about all the songs that were in the vault that never even got released, that because Kenny, basically, my dad had given Galaxy Sound Studios to Kenny in LA. They basically lived it. I mean, technically lived in the studio. So anytime
sure.
I would go to work, a lot of times I'd be missing from the office. My dad knew. He'd buzz me, Carolyn, get up here in your office. I literally was always in the studio with Face in LA and spent so much time down there, just sitting there, just absorbing, just
Mm-hmm.
because even though they weren't who they are now, they were so amazing to watch, and I just that influenced me musically. Just being in the studio and watching them, being there while they're creating two occasions. And I remember, gosh, it used to get on my last nerve. I never forget, learning how producers think, and as a producer, Joel, sometimes you may hit a lick and a run where the feel may be there, but oh my gosh, this is before this is before what is it? Auto tune. This is before Melodyne, all that stuff to correct your vocals. You could get a feel and maybe have done that line 6 times, but the feel and the emotion and the spirit of it is just so amazing. You may sometimes may sacrifice the pitch a little bit. I've never been one of those kind of people. It's like as soon as I mean literally as soon as somebody sings off key, including myself, it's like I it took me years to not like really cringe or flinch.
Yeah.
But when they were doing two occasions, I'll never forget. I was sitting at the board of LA, and Kenny was in the booth, and Carlos and all the guys they were doing their vocals, and he was like, what was it? I go for broke if I could be with you. What did he said? With you too. And I'm sitting here in my head, I'm like, in my English brain, I'm like, with you. And I finally just said it. And LA turned around and looked at me. He says, Negro, what is that going to sound like saying, if I could be with you? He said, you taking the funk out the. He said, just watch this. And it was just so funny because the little things that went on between LA and I, because he actually allowed me to pick one of the deal singles. And I remember, gosh, it was a. I wish I really had gotten my. This is just flowing. I didn't even plan on talking about any of this.
No worries.
I
It's
know it was
cool.
called Body. I think it was Body Talk. Now, Body Talk was funky, but it wasn't two occasions. And I was listening to it from an artist standpoint and not a consumer listener standpoint. And there's so many things when you grow up in the industry. like I say, it's different growing up. And I'm just talking from a non-experience of friends who didn't have a musical family to grow up in that aspire to be an artist, and you have to learn, and you basically come on your own and kind of learn as you go. But when you're already in it, you almost kind of think you know everything until you realize that you really don't know anything. So picking a hit is not something literally that can be learned. That's a
Right,
gift to be able to
right.
pick a hit. It's a gift to be able to listen outside of your comfort zone, or
Mm,
or your demographic where you are, you know, the surroundings, but you to learn how to listen for other people and have your ear to the ground in different places. I never really realized how amazing my
mm.
father was at just not even just being a visionary, but just his ear and hearing and listening. I mean, stuff that he put out, some of the artists were just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. He's like, trust me, you know. And then, I mean, down to learn, like I say, my musical experience is so wrapped up in so many things. And it's just weird because nobody's ever asked me that. And now you're helping me form how I will answer in other interviews, because it's kind of um, becoming a realization to me as I talk to you, if you will.
Cool,
You know,
cool.
I'm sorry,
That's
I could
why
talk forever. If you got to get your questions in.
I'm just saying that's kind of why I started this. A friend of mine, we were talking about how we got into music, what kept us pursuing it, and I mean everybody that we keep running into, we run into the same people, but we all got a different story. So I do love hearing it, and I love you being able to open up and tell us something. Um, so that gets you to today, right? So after you had a few kids and took a break from music, how did you jump back into touring and singing in a band that your dad signed?
That's a funny, funny story. um, so actually, what happened was after I had Curtis and Devin, and I think this was around the time that you and I met when the boys were really young, Dell. In my life, and my girlfriend Tiara, that I was in the group with, she, of course, the motorcycle comes along right as I decide to open the window. She took me to church. Believe it or not, Elder Barge was the first person to actually take me to church. I went to church, to Andre Crouch's church, as a matter of fact, in Pacoima, and I went
Mm,
there. I always loved Pastor Crouch's music, and of course, growing up with Keith Crouch and Kenneth Crouch, they were family, but I never got a chance to really experience Andre and Sandra. So when I went there, God slapped me. I mean, He just slapped me hard because I wasn't singing. I wasn't, and I
mm,
think when I was around, even Julie and the kids growing up, I wasn't singing. I wasn't pursuing a musical career. I kind of was just raising my kids, trying to figure it out. Still doing some things. And Howard and I would talk from time to time, and no, we talked all the time. What am I talking about? He called me and asked me would I be interested in singing some background. And he said, well, Jeff and I, we've been kind of doing a version of Shalimar overseas, and you know, um, he said, we just want to try something. He said, just get some female things. Jody didn't want to do it. She had basically declined the opportunity and they had been touring for about a year. This was in the 1999, about 2000. So,
mm,
um, I said, what the heck? I never dreamt I'd be singing with Shalimar, but in my head, this is going to be background. And so, as I started going to rehearsal and getting with Howard, I started realizing, I said, I'm going to be pretty much doing Jody's part. And they laughed because me being the biggest Shalimar fan in the world, I knew every song. So when Howard got stuck on words and songs that he hadn't been singing, he'd turn around and say, what's that word? Or what's that verse? Or what's this? And I would be able to feed it. So whatever, it was in London. I'll never forget. It was a private party. It was at a very upscale hotel called the Dorchester in central London. And these people had money. It was for a bar mitzvah. And when I tell you that I walked in, it was like being in a Steven Spielberg movie set. The way that they had it decorated, it was amazing. And the moment I walked in there, I was scared to death. I was scared, Joel. I was scared to death. Number one, to me, nobody could replace the Classic Three. And I was very good friends with Mickey Free, and I loved Delisa, and I was such good friends with all of them. But Jody, to me at that time, was just, I mean, I idolized her growing up, and I was like, no, nobody could ever replace Jody, you know? And so, anyway, without sparing you all the little details, we did that. And when we came back, I was so excited. I mean, I know that I sucked. I know I did, but of course they didn't know the difference. I was green. I was nervous. I kind of just, I was awkward, but came home, and of course my dad was at home, and he was like, "So your mom tells me that you went overseas, blah 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 blah. So what were you doing?" I said, "Oh, I went to the thing with Shalimar." Shalimar. Okay. Um, you Howard, and he said it. You Howard, and then when my dad started thinking, and when he started getting that, he started playing with his mustache, pulling on his beard. And he was then look, when he started wincing like this, I'm like, oh shit. Here we go. I'm sorry, is this the Walmart version? Can I cuss? Should I not cuss? Um, he he sat there and he said, so how much did this Shalimar gig pay you? And I gave him the amount, which I'll leave undisclosed. And he looked at me. He said, you got to be motherfucking kidding. And he sat there and he blinked his eyes, and that was my dad. When he did this, you knew it was about to drop. When he grabbed his eyes and looked up, he was like, call a meeting. Next thing I know, he had Mike Gardner, which is now our manager, Howard, Jeffrey, flew Jeffrey out here from Africa, Japan at the time where he was living. And we had a meeting at Shandara in Melrose, on Melrose. And the Thai restaurant, and he basically just laid it out. He basically pretty much said, hey, you guys, and the guy, and I understand, the guys really kind of formulated in their head that I probably would be the person that would make more sense about doing an audition. I could sing. I had done some stuff with Howard before. I'd known them all my life. They knew I knew the music, and I just respected it. So they already wanted me to do it, but I think it's the way in my father's eyes, because at the time, and understand, I knew nothing about trademarking. I knew nothing about any of that stuff. He basically let him know. He said, okay, well, you took my daughter overseas on the gig, everything else. You paid her what you wanted to pay her, but I own the brand. I own the name. So pretty much she didn't get what I would have had her pay. So at this point, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this. He handed out the splits of how he would do it. He said, you will not do Shalimar without her. This is my ship. I want to do it this way. And ultimately, he ended up kind of willing the brand to me. So that's a whole nother story. But and at the time, it was horrible. I felt like that Indian chief's daughter that just basically got I'm these guys sitting there looking at me, and I'm like, what do I say? What do I do? And he says, anything you answer to her. And that was just who my father was, and that's so much a part of who I'm not, or who I wasn't at the time. So years of uncomfortability. It didn't come easy at all. It was an adjustment for years. I never felt comfortable, and I even reached out to Jody at that point. I really didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. Because like I say, my thing, I went to make a little extra money, to go to London, to have some fun with these guys that I love, and it was too much responsibility for me, and I really didn't have the faith in myself to do it. But it just got to the point where it just started falling into place. And then I read a lot of things, and they're saying, oh, she's been in since 2005. I technically have been in there since 2001. We did a lot of private parties. So technically, I'm actually the longest standing female lead singer of the group Shalimar. I just didn't do any recording with them until 2015. So.
Right on. So closing up, what would you like to share, or what thoughts would you give someone who maybe doesn't have the same track or path that you'll have as a father in the industry, but that can see themselves on stage one day, maybe not in a situation that they thought would be possible.
Well, I just, of course, everybody that knows me, even with all my imperfections, and God is always at the center of what I believe and what He has for us. And my thing is, things that I never thought would be possible. I mean, really lending things to prayer, but it's really, I'll be honest, I see so many people getting away with murder because of how convenient it is for people to throw songs up, to get on YouTube, to get a following. We're in a microwave society right now, and the business has changed so much. I don't think I know a lot about the actual business enough to give that type of advice. But what I would say is be true to yourself, be true to your craft. And if it's something like me, I went away, I had kids, I did this. It kind of fell on my lap, but it was still a desire. And now to me, stage is life to me. So you have to be true to where your calling is. That's like you. You've done management, you've done everything, but your true calling, you're even though you're a producer, you're still an artist. The music is in you. So you have to answer to that. You really have to answer that. And study the people that came before you. I mean, this would be my thing. Pick somebody that you admire, and find out their story. Find somebody whose story is similar to yours, because there's so much education and journeys in people's journeys. Like, even though I had a father with those types of things, but I know it seems that it was still easy. It was very hard because there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And I'll be honest, I probably could have been so huge in the business. I didn't take advantage of the things because I didn't want people to think. I cared too much about what people think. Don't care what anybody thinks. If you know that God has a gift that He put in you, and if it's something that you feel and that you cannot deny, go after it with everything, and don't let anything just divert you from that. I mean, you are, and you have to. Nobody else believes in you, you got to believe in yourself, because there's a lot of talent out there. But what's going to end up separating them, I believe, I'm sorry, I just believe in God's favor, but I believe it's that tenacity and that push. There are people that I see out there that aren't half as talented, but their hustle supersedes the talent sometimes, and they get in there where other people will be timid. If you are timid, and like my dad told me, he said, you'll never make it in this business because you're too fucking. And I got it. I understand that. Doesn't mean you have to change who you are, but it means you have to have a thick skin. But you know what? Just don't give up. Never give up. That's the best advice I can tell you. Follow your heart. Research. Do your homework. Know your craft. Just like Kobe. You know what? Kobe gave us the best mentality. Watch Kobe Bryant's Mamba mentality. Watch it. Get the book if you can. I think it just kind of transcends into anything that anybody wants to do. Whether it's sports, whether it's music, it's about greatness. It's about not settling for mediocrity. It's about going for greatness. And that's really, don't go out there just to sing. Go out there to be the greatest singer. And if no, like I said, you got to believe that. If you believe it, you make everybody else believe it. I promise you. That's my simple analogy of what I think people need to know about being in this business. And it's about your fight. It's about your fight and your hustle.
Right on. Well, thank you for joining us. I do appreciate it. This has been Dreams with Miss Carolyn Griffey. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Love you, and I hope to see you soon.
All right. Peace.
Peace
Bye-bye.
out. Bye, Annie.